Good evening. Oh, good afternoon. You know, I sat here for 5 hours, straight through. I watched some board members leave. I watched you have your lunch. And I kind of wonder how serious this is if no one's going to stay and really listen. It affects the men and women of the New York City Department of Correction and the inmates. And I've said publicly on more than one occasion that inmates deserve to be treated with respect. They're not there to be abused, and neither are correction officers. And I've heard a few people testify before you, but I didn't hear anyone talk about the inmate that slashes another inmate and gives him 90 stitches across his face. What do I do with that inmate that douses another inmate with hot water, scalding him? What do I do with that inmate that every single day extorts another inmate? What do I do with that inmate that rapes another inmate? Now, you call it solitary confinement, some call it punitive segregation. I call it shutting him down so that he doesn't threaten the life of other inmates anymore. Put him in a place where we could supervise him closely. Put him in a place where another inmate's not getting raped tonight. Although it's only one correction officer and we have to go back and forth on each side to find out what's going on. There's 35, 40 inmates on this side, 35, 40 inmates on that side. Who's to watch the inmate when he's getting raped in the bathroom? I don't hear anybody talking about the correction officer that gets his jaw broken by an inmate. Now, yes, we have had correction officers that have crossed the line and they have been punished for it, rightfully so. And it's unacceptable to us, to the union, to the men and women that wear the badge. But at the same time, it is unacceptable for us to sit here and listen to people advocate for those that have raped, murdered, maimed, robbed, done everything they've done to another inmate, to another human individual, and yet nothing's supposed to happen to them. Now, and I'm not saying put the inmate in the cell for 23 hours a day. If you want to let him out, let him out. But there's rules and regulations. If the Justice Department would do their job, and the Mental Health Department would do their job, and the Social Service Department would do their job, you wouldn't have a job because everybody would be doing what they're supposed to do. But we're faced with a problem in the city of New York where even the Board of Correction, you said for yourself, Mr. Cohen, correct? Are you Mr. Cohen? You said for yourself you weren't searched. So from now on, I'm going to ask the Commissioner to institute a policy that all Board of Correction members get searched. Let me just finish. I didn't interrupt. Get searched from top to bottom just like everybody else. If the mayor of the city of New York got to get searched, you got to get searched too. So that policy should cease immediately. And you should be the first one to write a letter requesting that all Board of Correction members be searched. And I'll look for a copy of that letter.
I asked for it today.
Thank you so much, but I'll look for a copy of the written letter. Thank you so much. But anyway, I think that it's important that we do something. Something has to be done. Regardless of whether some people think it's right, wrong, or indifferent, something's got to get done. Because if not, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to become a major problem in the Department of Correction. For 20 years, I've been screaming to the Giuliani administration, to the Bloomberg administration, and now, thankfully, we have the de Blasio administration that's doing something. But it's incumbent upon you and your brothers and sisters that sit on the board with you to make a move that's going to be able to be beneficial to both sides. If you want Joe Pont, the commissioner of the agency, to institute policy and procedure in writing, give us the policy to do the job, and we won't let you down. But we've got to start somewhere. Everything that shines is not gold. We have to do something. There are men and women that are on that island, officers and inmates, depending on what you do. And I would challenge the board. Come sit down with correction officers the same way you sit down with all of these different organizations. And listen to the concerns of the men and women that have urine and feces thrown on them every single tour. Sit down with the men and women who go home with busted lips. Sit down with the men and women who are abused, intimidated by these same gangbangers, by these same individuals. That these same individuals that take out razor blades and slash other inmates. Come sit down, and we have an auditorium on Rikers Island. It's in the George Motion Detention Center. There'll be a ton of officers in there. Hear their grievances as well, because the Board of Correction is challenged by law to represent both sides, not just one. But you have so many members of the Board of Correction that think that they are above everybody else. They think that they're better than everybody else. And because there's no way you're going to tell me that when I signed up that I should have sat here for 5 hours. And I'm sitting like everybody else, and I'm good with that. That's why I didn't say nothing about it. I'm cool. But at the end of the day, treat us the same way that you listen to the JAC, listen to the COBA. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Seabrook, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I know we have common goals, all of us, to have safe, secure, humane jails, and these proposals that BOC proposed that the Board of Correction has adopted are measures meant to address the violence. So in light of your position and your extraordinary experience with the Board of Correction officers, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions that might help certainly me and my colleagues to better understand what is going on out at Rikers, so that we can try to address the violence that we know that your staff are absolutely subjected to. There's no doubt about that. So let me just ask a few questions. Do you agree that there is a culture of violence at Rikers?
With inmates, yes.
Okay. And do you have an opinion as to what the root causes of violence out at Rikers is?
I think part of the problem is that they don't have anything to do. I think part of the problem is, and I've said this and I went into RNDC, you don't sit a 16-year-old or 17-year-old in a day room watching reruns of Good Times for 5, 6, 7 hours and expect them to be able to function. I think that it's important. Teach them how to be a short order cook. Teach them how to write a resume. Teach them how to tie a tie. Give them something to look forward to when they leave so that they don't have to come back. But we're faced with so much mismanagement in the Department of Corrections. We're in our 9th commissioner in 17 years or 18 years. How's that possible? And then the commissioner comes in with a new policy. And I'm not saying that Joe's policy is wrong or right. I'm just giving you the facts of the amount of people. We've had 11 chiefs of department. We've had 25 assistant chiefs and deputy chiefs. We've had 35 deputy commissioners. You can't function like that. There's no consistency. So the men and women that do the job, the correction officers on the front line, are faced with a new rule and a new regulation every time someone changes policy and procedure by transferring this one or that one. There has to be a little bit more consistency. So, Judge, I would suggest that we get down to the root of it of saying, let's start with, example, mental health. Let's use that for example. If a correction officer is going to work into a mental health unit, then the correction officer should be allowed to put in a resume throughout the whole Department of Correction, and anyone that has prior mental health training and or service should apply for that job and should receive that job above someone who doesn't have that type of training. We need 40 hours worth of training, not 8 hours. You can't expect a correction officer to be able to function productively with 8 hours of training, trained by someone who had 8 hours of training. That doesn't make any sense to me. Give us the training that we need and we can do the job. Give us the resources that we need and we can do the job. But if you don't give them to us, we can't function.
All right, so let me follow up on that, because I do spend a lot of time out at Rikers. I've gotten to speak to a lot of the officers, and Chief Carino's here, and Warden Becky Scott, and all the great staff out at Rikers that's really bringing about a lot of the reform. What is it, can you be specific as to what you believe your officers need to be able to be effective in providing the security while reducing the violence?
I think that in providing the security and reducing the violence, you have to have a level of law and order. Let me give you an example. If an inmate slashes another inmate or assaults and slashes a correction officer, he or she should be rearrested, charged with the crime, and face the consequences. But since the inmate doesn't have any punishment, it's not a deterrent for them. So the Bronx District Attorney's Office is not prosecuting them for assaulting other inmates or officers. So what does that mean? I could get away with it. I could punch you in the face, break your jaw, nothing's going to happen to me. The only thing that can happen to me, because the DA's office is not doing any work, is that the Department of Correction wants to put me in punitive segregation, but you can't put me in punitive segregation because we're having this conversation about how you're trying to eliminate punitive segregation. So the inmate is in a win-win situation. Now, not all inmates are bad. You've heard me say this publicly. I have a brother doing 25 years to life. I feel for my brother. I don't want my brother hurt. But at the end of the day, there has to be law and order in jails as well. There has to be consequences. So if the correction officer has the tools, infractions, policy, procedure, has support from the upper management, has support from the district attorney's office, from different parts of the judicial system, then that inmate is going to say, I can't get away with this. There's going to be a problem if I do.
All right, so let me just talk about the other issue. The data seems to suggest that the officer on inmate violence levels have been dramatically increasing. Do you have any recommendation as to what should be done with those officers?
Judge,
we have the officer on inmate violence?
Judge, I think that they're mixing apples and oranges sometimes. Let me give you an example. If I touch an inmate, it's a use of force. If I put my hands on an inmate, it's classified as a use of force. I didn't do anything but guide the inmate from point A to point B, but I have to write this use of force report. So in order for the prior administration to be able to justify a lot of things that they were doing before they testified before the city council, they added up all these numbers. Now, if you told me that the correction officer had a physical altercation fighting with an inmate, I tell you those numbers are probably going to go down by 2/3. If you tell me that he touched the inmate, then the numbers are probably going to even go higher, because you're not, as soon as you put your hands on them. So what I would suggest, and what I've suggested to the correction officers, and I've said this publicly, use whatever force is necessary to terminate the threat. I'm not talking about yelling and screaming back and forth. I'm talking about to prevent this inmate from hurting himself, another inmate, or yourself, or someone else. Use whatever force. Once the force is over, it's over. It's just like I've heard people testify about they have to kiss their loved one through the bars on the visit floor. We don't have bars on Rikers Island on the visit floor. We don't have that. That doesn't exist. So people are being disingenuous. That's not fair. And as far as individuals that are having to have booth visits as opposed to physical visits, let's look at the history of, did that person assault that visitor the last time that they were here, and that's why we're protecting the visitor? Did that person receive contraband from that visitor the last time we were here, and that's why we've got them separated? Is there a serious threat level to do that? But people are being disingenuous, and it's not fair. It's not fair to destroy the integrity of a correction officer or an inmate when it's not true. And I've said, and I'll say it again, correction officers that don't do what they're supposed to do, there is no room for them to wear this badge. But damn, give us a break too. Come sit down and listen to what we've got to go through. Come sit down and find out that we are under tremendous amount of stress, totally understaffed, and then the people that's supposed to be with the Board of Corrections, they walk around like they're better than us. They don't want to talk to us. And that's a shame, because we employ them as well. But they won't do that for us, Judge. I'm telling you they won't do that for us. And I'm telling you my name wasn't the last one on this list. But it's all good. I like that type of stuff, because it gives me the opportunity to listen and thank that man upstairs for the blessings that he gives me. You see, hold on, one more second, because the judge is right. What do we do about it now? Do we turn around and just make believe it doesn't exist? Is there a culture of violence that we have to attack? Let's take a look at it. Let's look at, ask the Department of Corrections to give you the numbers on whether or not you touched the inmate or whether or not you had a physical altercation with the inmate. You'll see the numbers go down. I understand that the Southern District report from the federal courts They're stepping in, the federal U.S. attorney to step in and do what it is that they have to do. And you know what? If it's going to make the department, the city of New York, and everybody else more accountable, welcome. Let's go. But at the end of the day, y'all got to do your job too.
Bobby, this is Humor.
Just Norman, brother.
Bobby, Norman. So you've been, I think, 20 years. You've been president for 20 years.
Yes, sir.
So in 1994, there were 1,037 slashings in the Department of Corrections, and in this year there have been 90 so far, which is too many. It's more than last year when they were 73. It's more than the year before when they were 71. But the numbers through the 90s were in the 1,000, 500, 400 range, and then they went down. I can't show this. It's a graph. I know you're familiar.
Yes, sir.
With the data. I wonder if you could help me understand, based on your experience, why the numbers were so high before, why they came down dramatically through into the 21st century, and then they've gone up over the past 5 or 6 years. But the numbers were 7, 8, 9 times the size they are now.
In those administrations you're talking about, I think it's the Carrick administration is one of them in there. The Horn administrations, no, the Doris Shuro administration is the one in there. Carrick did a lot of searches. Every time you turn around, we were searching, keeping inmates safe. So I give Bernie his props. We were keeping inmates safe. Dora, on the other hand, Dr. Doris Shuro, on the other hand, hired 100 psychoanalysts to tell her, no, it doesn't work like that. And the numbers started to go north. Use of force went up because of the way that you calculated the use of force. You didn't calculate it by real assaults. There are some assaults that take place, but it's defense of another inmate or themselves or the correction officer. So you have the style of two different commissioners, and that's what would make the numbers change.
The A and B use of force, which have to do with injuries that you can objectively see, those numbers have also increased, haven't they?
Yes, they have, and it's the reporting that makes all of that take place. It's almost like, what do you want to report? Who's going to look at the report? It's almost like you have to answer to somebody. Someone answers to the mayor of the city of New York, to the city council, to Elizabeth Crowley, who is chairman of fire correction, and you want your numbers to look right. But at the same time, you want to keep your people safe. Look, our job is care, custody, and control. We will maintain that. We will keep inmates safe. But we ask that you help keep us safe too.
Actually, I have a follow-up question. Yes, in terms of the lockout, generally our rule is that inmates have to be locked out 14 hours a day. And we understand that part of the proposal for the enhanced supervision is to lock out only 7 hours a day. And when inquiring about that, it's because there would be 50 inmates, and they're the most dangerous inmates at Rikers. So to make it a safer environment, only allow 25 out at one time. Would you agree with me the way to make it the most safe then would be to have separate units where there's only 25 inmates per unit with a higher staffing of officer to inmate where they could be locked out?
That's it right there.
More amount of time with programming?
That's it right there. Give us the amount of staff that we need, and you can lock all 50 of them out. But give us the staff members that we need. Judge, when I started this job in 1985, I started in what was then called ARDC, which is now RNDC. I worked in the worst housing area in the jail. It was called 4 Lower. People used to look at their name on the schedule and bang in and not want to come to work for the whole week because they had the 4 building. Those were the worst of the worst. All adolescents. Released from the Bing. But when you have steady officers, when you have steady consistency, when you have your policies in place for young men to understand where you're coming from, and with the staff that you have to have and the help that you need from the managers in unit management or wherever it is that you want to call it, you're going to get the job done. You're going to have some kinks in the beginning, but at the end of the day, you're going to get the job done. Give us the staffing that we need. Hold not only the department, but the city and everybody else accountable for what's supposed to take place. And we will prove to you that correction officers are the best damn correction officers in the world. And we won't be targeted by the five in the last 5 years, 6 years that have been on the front page of the paper for doing something wrong. Let's not talk about that. That's 5. Let's talk about the thousands that do what they're supposed to every single day. Right there, somewhere right now, there's 20 minutes after 2 and somebody's not going home because they're getting stuck for another 8 hours. But we don't get the board to come out there and say, officer, what's the problem? Officer, how's your bathroom working? Officer, you got heat and hot water in this area? Officer, you have this? We don't have that. They walk past us like we don't even exist. And then some of them that do walk around, they think that they, prima donnas. I get it, it's cool. But treat us the same way. Respect us the same way. And fight for us the same way. You want to fight for an inmate. And I don't have a problem with inmates because you meet the same people on the way up as you can meet on the way down. And I've seen inmates on the street that have offered to buy me a drink. So I can't be that bad.
I've just got one follow-up question. I know when I have met with the various union leadership and members of COBA and all, what we hear frequently, and certainly what I've heard in my rulemaking committee over the last year, is that you all are not really trained and adept at dealing with mentally ill, and that so many of our inmates are mentally ill. Would you agree with me in light of that with the enhanced supervision unit, that mentally ill inmates should not be placed in there?
I'm not saying, well, that takes me back to where I said that Rikers Island is a new dumping ground for the city of New York. We have the mentally ill, we have the innocent, we have the guilty. Okay, we have them all. And the homeless. But at the end of the day, if the Department of Mental Health did their job and put individuals that have mental health issues in proper housing before they come to jail, as opposed to dumping them there, we wouldn't be talking about this. So to answer your question even further, give us the training that we need and change the environment like Joe Pont wants to do, and let's give it a shot. The only thing that could happen here is we go back to where we started from. Put something on and say, okay, Joe, you got a year, 18 months. I don't know what it is. 2 years. I don't know what you're going to come up with. Either way, correctional officers have to do the job anyway. So it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. You can either do it or not do it. At the end of the day, we still got to do it. You're not going here to do it. We got to do it. So let's do it and do it together. Let's take it and say, you know what? Let's put this policy in place that he wants and hold his feet to the fire and say, if it's not done in 16 months, 18 months, whatever it is, we're going to scratch it. But give us the training. Let a correctional officer go learn for 40 hours from a designated, certified mental health instructor that gives them a piece of paper like a diploma, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be accredited so that when we go to court and a judge says, well, what did you do? We can't say we learned 8 hours of training from the jiu-jitsu instructor at the academy. That don't work. Give us the training that we need and we'll get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. Have a great holiday. God bless you and your family. Thank you.
The next speaker is, I ask people to hold their applause. The next speaker is Elias Hussamadeen, followed by Julian Davis, followed by Dr. Siegel. Elias?